Welcome to the Business Performance Podcast, where we feature expert thought leaders and cover their best strategies, stories, and advice that you can use to successfully mature your own business performance. Now, here is your host, business coach, Henry Schneider. Hello, everyone. This is Henry Schneider with the Business Performance Podcast, and today it's my pleasure to talk with Jim Calhoun from Nectar9, which is an AI-first company and enterprise content management marketing company that I guess you're still kind of in the startup years, but welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Henry. It's great to be here. I appreciate it. And yeah, you characterized it right. We're in the early stages here. We've been around for a handful of years now, really kind of working with our customers hand in hand to kind of bring together a little bit of a new vision for what you can do in terms of marketing automation when you apply AI to it.
Okay, so the first thing that intrigues me is the name of your company, Nectar9. So you could explain how you came up with the name and what it signifies?
I was afraid you'd ask that, but it was one of those things where sitting in conference rooms with people and thinking through what this is and how to incorporate something that was sort of futuristic feeling and going through what's available, what's not available. That was really where we settled on that. It was short and we think pretty memorable. And so nothing too sexy or too outrageous in terms of how we came up with it, but thanks for asking.
Okay. All right. So can you briefly describe then Nectar9, your customers, and the types of products and services you provide?
Yeah, sure. So Nectar9 is what we call an autonomous marketing company. So there's the class of software which has to do with marketing automation. So taking over the tasks of how one goes about getting their business in front of customers and reeling them in and getting them to buy your products or services. And so we looked at what was available in the space in terms of marketing automation as it relates to content marketing, in particular on social and across multiple channels. What we found were a bunch of business intelligence solutions out there, which are, one way to classify it as sort of glorified spreadsheets and pivot tables that are connected to kind of data sources like Google or Facebook or Snap or Twitter, et cetera. And we thought that given the ability of AI and cloud computing and the maturity of that was coming on board, that there was room for a new class of software that we characterize as autonomous marketing software that really takes on some of those tasks that had been traditionally done manually by teams or agencies, that sort of thing.
Okay. So what does you mean by an AI first company? What does that mean?
So that kind of gets into, it's an important term for us because we really kind of approach things with how can we apply AI to kind of existing business problems. So not AI for the sake of AI or AI for the sake of general AI, but really looking at what are the tasks that people have to take on in terms of marketing, content marketing, getting in front of their customers, dealing with their audience segments and giving them the right messaging to kind of help educate them, bring them along the marketing funnel, and applying, really what ends up being kind of complex mathematical calculations and probabilistic math to something that has been traditionally handled and by teams that are optimizing, a particular channel or looking at maybe kind of where all the P's are on the plate across multiple channels. And then those people are rolling the P's from one plate to another. So we thought there's a whole capability out there that the kind of incumbent folks that are in the business intelligence space are valued greatly by their customers for the dashboards and reporting, and that's sort of the ground truth. But we felt like they were kind of hamstrung by the sort of reporting expectation that customers had. We decided we didn't want to win the reporting or dashboard Olympics, but what we wanted to do was really drive performance and automation and save people time and drive performance up across channels using complex mathematical machine learning and AI to analyze content and come up with behavioral interest things that otherwise you're sort of tasking humans to do. So you can really accelerate the amount of increase the amount of experimentation that you're doing and accelerate the rate of learning that companies can do. And there really wasn't a whole lot of people that were new in the space that were really what we characterize as AI first. You've got people that are incumbents that are trying to add this sort of stuff, some successfully, others less successfully, but we started with that core promise of let's turn things over to intelligent machines and see where we can go from there.
Okay, all right. All right, so now AI it's been a term that's been around for a long time, and it's
Yep.
kind of broad. We're talking like could be robots, RPAs, could be machine learning, deep learning, cognitive insight. So where do you see you fit into the whole spectrum of stuff?
Yeah, so this is very specialized, verticalized application of AI. So there's certain classes of AI that are more relevant towards marketing and marketing automation than others. There's a few things that have to do with neurolinguistic programming or really understanding the context and meaning of content or landing pages or other things that are part of the marketing funnel. So that's a big part of what we do, helping extract interest, behavioral interest, things that can improve performance on things that, adding thousands of behavioral interest to your sort of targeting sets automatically, something you would never take the time to do manually. That's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect of it really kind of comes down to probabilistic calculations across multiple channels, which is not a simple math problem. And, refining over time our approaches to that, we've been able to eke out really significant gains for customers in terms of what they can expect in terms of every dollar spent and what they're getting back for that on these various channels.
So what is your sweet spot now in terms of customer size and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, so good question. We characterize it as sort of small to mid-sized businesses as kind of defined by, the governments out there and agencies out there. So that's really between about 10 million in revenue and $1 billion in revenue. And that's really where our customers sit. So they're spending somewhere between 50 to 100,000 a month across various channels doing marketing online, and significantly upwards from there, so millions of dollars a month. So it's not really for the small guy. There's plenty of things that come out of the box with Facebook or Google or these other platforms. If you just want to kind of apply AI there, they're offering those solutions there. So this is really for a customer that is looking to achieve greater scale in their marketing efforts. And they've already reached some sort of theoretical maximum of what they can get with their kind of current setup and tools and that sort of thing.
Okay, wonderful. Now, I'd like to focus in on quality. Quality, again, is another broad term. So
Sure.
What does quality mean for you and for Nectar9?
Quality. Well, so first of all, obviously we need our software to run 24/7 around the clock. And that's one of the big advantages of machine learning and AI and cloud computing is that you can essentially take a lot of functions that were part of a team's daily activities and turn them over to intelligent machines to make decisions and move things around and shift budgets and turn things on, turn things off 24/7. So reliability is a big aspect of quality. And then in terms of the performance, we really need to make sure that we're making material gains. And by that, I mean, 40, 50% minimum kind of gains in historical performance versus kind of conventional approaches. And with that, plus the reduction in time required to get experiments live, that sort of thing, run new creatives, all that. Those are really what we think of in terms of quality. How can we make it easy for somebody to run new creatives, test new audiences, all the stuff that they would kind of do manually. But for us, quality is really the sort of ease of use, reliability, 24/7 kind of campaign optimization going, all the time, and getting material gains out of what your marketing expectations are and your budget expectations are.
Okay, so now it's interesting that you mentioned about reliability. So do you get into having any type of liability associated with that, or is it still just more just trying to get people to try different things?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of we have a service level agreement that is sort of Six Sigma uptime for customers, that sort of thing. The backbone that we work off of, which would be sort of the Amazon Web Services infrastructure, we're somewhat dependent on that, but those have been really reliable for us. So I don't know about the liability that we get into there, apart from meeting that we have to meet our SLAs and deliver on that. And we haven't, knock on wood, run into challenges. There are some things that happen on the receiving end of our communication. So the Facebooks, Googles, et cetera of the world, where, they can have outages, they can make API changes, those kind of things. So we have to be really quick and on top of it to be resilient. But generally speaking, there's enough stuff going all the time that things are working, as expected, and fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, I know. My platform of choice is LinkedIn. We use that quite a bit, but I know they're constantly changing their API and rules to prevent automated bots and programs going out there to send out stuff through there. So that's a tough thing to stay on top of.
Yeah, it is. It's challenging. I mean, one of the biggest things that we went through was call it the Cambridge Analytica sort of fallout which was really kind of when we were first getting started. So when we first got Athena running, it was, it's initially just a Facebook only kind of platform where there's a lot of APIs to play with, a rich data set to tap into. They're probably the most sophisticated set of APIs and capabilities that are available to somebody like us. So that's why we started there. And then, of course, they went through all sorts of convolutions and, sort of deprecating APIs. And, so we had to figure out how quickly we could scramble there. But just the way we've architected the software, we use these components that are these connectors. And so as things that are removed or we need to shift things over there, we've been able to keep up with it and maintain performance. So it keeps us on our toes, that's for sure.
Definitely. Okay, so what are one or two of the biggest myths or misconceptions out there when it comes to marketing and enterprise content management?
So I think misconceptions that, at least as we see it, kind of where we sit, would be that you're giving up a lot of control by turning things over to the machines, that they're not going to be able to outperform humans on making these performance optimizations. And, that's one aspect of what we do, but that's a really reliable and provable sort of, factual, mathematically based sort of empirical kind of way of looking at, do you see gains here or not? The comfort level that different customers have in taking that approach on it's interesting to watch. So usually it starts with a small test to say, maybe let's give this a shot. We call them bake-offs. So we go in and we say, hey, show us what you're doing. Let's see if we can kind of set up a test similar to what your approach is today. Turn it over to Athena and see how we do. And those are pretty compelling for customers. But even in the case of some of our more advanced customers, it takes a while for them to get comfortable saying, okay, we're going to turn all of this stuff over to Athena to sort of manage, the turning on, turning off, adjusting bids, adjusting budgets, changing audiences, all the stuff that are things that marketers have felt like they have a lot of control over. Once they understand that we're making intelligent decisions on their behalf, then they get really comfortable with it. And that's really where the exciting part kicks in.
So within Athena, then, it's doing the A/B testing type of stuff, all internal?
Yeah. So
it's turn on, let it run, and then...
That's it. Yeah. So it's multivariate is really the way to describe it. So it's looking at not only multiple variables within campaigns or targeting groups, but across multiple channels, which gets really complex really fast. And that's something where when you look at the calculations that Athena's running, and I'm by no means a mathematician, I rely on people that are far brighter than me to do these kind of things. But when you look at the calculations that are running kind of all the time, 24/7, these are not the kind of calculations that a team with a spreadsheet or a team with a dashboard are going to run and have that high of confidence in making those decisions. So what you find is that people get into habits and they make adjustments and they move things from here to there, but they're not necessarily taking advantage of real-time opportunities where bid pressure might be up on one channel. It may be creating opportunities on another channel. And machines are really resilient in figuring that stuff out pretty quickly and making those very minor shifts between those things that can eke out major gains in performance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now, what do you see as the biggest challenge that companies face with doing this now?
Well, it does come down to confidence. It comes down to giving up a little bit of control over really what I look at as an isolated aspect of marketing, which is sort of performance optimization. You have a lot of control over how you're getting your, the same amount of control you have today over what kind of creative you're making, what kind of strategy you've got, those kind of things. So, in one hand, we enable you to focus on the things that you're really well suited to as a marketing strategist, as a thinker, as a human, as a creative person. We really just want you to focus on that and turn the performance optimization and make it easy to get all that stuff online and into the right channels and across the right creative formats and all that stuff. That's the biggest thing that we see is getting people comfortable with, I'm gonna take some aspect of what I do that, frankly, if I were really honest with myself, is complex and mathematical and empirical, and turn that over to machines that are really built to be, empirical and mathematical by design. And that's the biggest thing that I think people really wrestle with. But once they open their eyes to it, it's really pretty fun.
All right, so what about some? I guess there's got to be other fears too, because you're relinquishing control of what's going on. What are some of the other fears that people have with this?
Well, I think fears are that it's going to do something that you don't expect, or that it's going to take some creative and run it against an audience that it's not supposed to, and these kind of things. And it's not going to do that. It's not going to go outside of the boundary boxes that you set. You kind of give it your constraints. You give Athena your constraints in terms of budget and audience and goals for optimization, and it really will operate within that sandbox. And so, but there's still a whole aspect of fear of giving up that control, and knowing that is something that people really find challenging. But once they get it, and it's a lot of fun.
Okay, so once you turn Athena on, what does it leave the marketing people to do then? Since they were focused on this like 20 all day long now.
Yeah. So one way to look at it is it takes the drudgery out of it, which is sort of going through spreadsheets and saying, okay, well, this performed okay yesterday. How am I going to do this? Or it takes away let's run a split test for 6 weeks and then kind of look at the data and decide to do another split test for another 6 weeks. And if you think about it that way, which a lot of customers do, how they've traditionally approached this, it's very iterative. It's very long cycles. You're doing a handful of experimentation that you can do manually. So the cost of experimentation with AI and machine learning is very low. So it's really kind of a function of how quickly you can crank out strategy and creative to take advantage of it. So we've got customers that are running tens of thousands of experiments simultaneously, looking to see where things are moving. And that really opens people up to, this is where we get the great performance gains, the reduction in cost of acquisition, and that kind of stuff that, is the bread and butter of the marketing trade. But that's really the big exciting part.
Okay, so can you share a story of how you helped a specific company overcome these obstacles and succeed?
Yeah. So one of the ones that I like to point to is a company called InView, which is a kind of a 3D virtual chat world. You can buy outfits and become a DJ and do all this fun stuff. They've got a couple 100 million users across the globe, and they really look at some pretty specific marketing objectives, which have to do with their the cost of a paying customer. So they care. They obviously want more people to try it, but they really want people in there that are buying virtual goods and things that fuel their business growth. And so we got in there to InView with a pretty specific assignment to help them with their brand advertising, or what we call kind of top of the funnel sort of awareness type of stuff. They've got amazing artwork and examples of people playing in this environment and enjoying themselves, and it's a very visual environment. And so they had a team that was dedicated to kind of getting that sort of top of the funnel stuff going and marketing. And what happened over the course of getting that engagement going was that the growth team, who we met with, and they were pretty skeptical of, the ability to do what they were doing on steroids and, this sort of thing. They looked at, over the course of a couple months, they looked at the key performance indicators that they're measured against, which had to do with new user acquisition, cost per payer, revenue, return on ad spend, which were not the measurements that the brand team had. And they saw that we were outperforming them and using a lot more creative to do that. And so we got into another discussion with them. And then they said, okay, let's give you guys Facebook budget for a month and let's see how you do. And I've got some slides if you want me to share those, or we can put that a little bit later if you prefer.
I think we'll put a little bit later.
Sure, no problem. But yeah, that was really a great example of somebody being skeptical, looking at what we might be able to do, giving us a test with a particular channel, and then saying, okay, let's see what you can do with all the channels that we're spending across. And they really saw significant, multiple 3.5 times the improvement in their return on ad spend and volume of customers coming in.
Now, thinking about that, can you distill that down into a simple moral of your story?
The moral of the story would be do an experiment, take a look and see how AI can apply to a specific part of your marketing funnel. Look at that in terms of how it might be able to apply to a broader set of objectives and maybe a lower funnel kind of revenue optimization, retention kind of objective. Experiment with one channel, and then look at how that might be applied across multiple channels and give it a test, and go all in and take advantage of it and put more creative in there, figure it out and see where it takes you.
Now, wonderful. Okay, now let's talk about, go focus back to quality. So when you start focusing on quality, what are some of the common pitfalls and mistakes that you have to keep in mind when you're working in this environment?
Yeah, so obviously when you're dealing with creative and going to market and getting creative in front of consumers, you want to make sure that people are actually taking a look at the creative, making sure it makes sense, all that stuff. And those processes tend to exist. So we take advantage of that infrastructure that's out there within a company to say, hey, here's where we start the creative, here's how we review it, here's how we refine it. The idea here with AI is not to necessarily get it perfect, but to have more variation in your creative. So that's a little bit liberating for people. Another aspect of quality that I think is important is and this is maybe really specific to marketing automation as it relates to digital, but it's important as you're operating at a certain scale to have an attribution partner or a third party that you consider the ground truth in terms of where each conversion or each revenue event came from. And without that, you're sort of dealing with the platforms individually to be honest brokers, which I think in general they are. But they tend to over-report in terms of their performance, as what we've seen when you have an attribution partner in there. So the bigger you get, the more concerned you are with quality and knowing exactly where your revenues and customers are coming from. And at some point, you really need to have a ground truth, a partner that is giving you that attribution data, so you know exactly what to attribute to what channel. And of course, we can work with those to really help you optimize across those channels. But I think that's an aspect of quality that as you get to a certain scale with your spend, that becomes very important.
Now when you start looking at that and running Athena, does Athena ever give unexpected results or something that, well, I never would have thought that would have been the case?
Yeah, all the time. It's pretty interesting. So we had, for example, a company that was in the juice category, and they wanted to come out with a bunch of cocktail recipes to give people examples of ways that they could use this juice product to do craft cocktails. And one of the most interesting things about that was they had a good variety of creatives there that they had produced. And at the time the campaign was running, it was around, Thanksgiving holiday time, and the very clear winner in all that creative was pink champagne cocktails. So they had a handful of variations of cocktails that had to do with kind of pink and champagne, and those were far and away the winners. And if you think about it from a traditional marketing perspective, you're thinking it's holiday time. I need cranberry, I need, warm drinks, I need all these things. But absolutely, for the market that they were going after, which was kind of millennial women, the pink champagne cocktails were all the rage at that point in time. And they discovered that. They actually ended up getting some public relations around it, in magazines, kind of covering these cocktails. And, so you can spot trends if you allow yourself to experiment a little bit more radically there. And those are the kind of little things that people learn pretty quickly, the benefits of kind of radical experimentation and, hey, let's try a lot of stuff and turn it over to the machines. It's exciting.
Now, I would think something like that is ephemeral. It may work in
Sure.
2019, 2020 is going to be something entirely different. The same time period.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And I think that again is an argument for radical experimentation to accelerate the rate of learning. You're going to learn new things all the time. And there's a saying, and I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, but you can't step in the same river twice, right? So the water's always moving. The time's not always the same. It's impossible to step in the same river twice. And that's very true with marketing as well. So, whether or not this year at holiday time, pink champagne cocktails are trending, probably not. But if you're getting that variety of experimentation into your creative out there and letting the machine tell you what's really working, and take away that human bias of, well, it's holiday time, we need to have cranberry based drinks that are warm, whatever it is that your assumptions are, you really take that human bias out of it. And that's very exciting to our customers because they get to see, hey, I can experiment with a lot of stuff. We have other customers that have found parts of the market that they never knew that they appealed to. So companies that have figured out things that really resonate with LGBT communities, for example, that they had never really targeted specifically before, and they figured out certain variations of the creative were really strong performers within that sort of defined segment. So it really opens you up. This idea of radical experimentation is kind of critical to. You wouldn't do it without AI. You wouldn't do it without machine learning. So if you've got AI and machine learning, you should be experimenting much more at much higher volumes.
Okay, so just thinking about it with the juice. So how rapidly did they get the information? So I mean, it seems to me like if you're focused on cranberries and hot stuff, if you wait too long, the pink champagne fad is over and it's not really going to help you. So how fast can they react? How fast do you get the information so you can react?
Incredibly fast. So that was, there were probably 60 or 70 different variations of that creative, each one was a different cocktail. They all had beautiful, imagery and creatives and hero shots and all that stuff that you'd expect with a good marketing campaign. But it was clear within a few days that this was the trend, and within a week it was clear that those were the winners. And so the nice thing about machine learning and AI and automation as a combined sort of system is it starts to naturally turn off and shift budgets towards those things that are better performers without any sort of manual intervention to frankly slow you down.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's what you want to be able to react that fast.
Yeah.
I would think if it was around Thanksgiving time, if you waited a month to react, okay, you've missed an opportunity.
It's done, yeah. And the nice thing about digital in particular is you get that data really quickly. You're kind of dealing in real time with results that are coming in, and within thousands of, few thousand impressions, you can start to get across each of your different creatives and audiences and that sort of thing. And applying advanced mathematics, you can get really pretty nimble, much more nimble than you could if you were dealing with kind of manual sort of review processes and figuring things out, or looking at a bunch of spreadsheets or pivot tables and thinking, okay, well, I should really, maybe I should move this over there and let's run that for a week and then let's see what happens in the next week. And so it just really accelerates the rate of learning there.
And now, the kind of changing gears a little bit.
Sure.
I guess Athena, it's only as good as the data you feed into it. So how do you deal with reliability of the information that's coming into Athena so you can really extract meaningful results out of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's somewhat dependent on what the data that we get back from the corresponding channels, the Google's, Facebook's, Twitter, et cetera, Snap. So they have a vested interest in making sure that their segments are performing well for you. They want to report accurately to you so you can make better decisions, whether you're doing that as a human or whether you're doing that with machines and programmatically. But yeah, I mean, I think we're really pleased with it overall. These platforms have evolved to a point where they've got great data, sometimes scary levels of data in terms of who you are, what you know, what sort of lookalike groups you're associated with, helping you find new customers, that sort of thing. And so we've been really pleased with the ability to get data back, often anonymized data. So we don't necessarily get data back on you, Henry, but we get data back in aggregate as far as these people are performing like this with this, and maybe we should shift some stuff over there. And then AI also helps you deal with segmenting customers, creating new audiences, creating new lookalikes, that sort of thing that, again, would historically be manual efforts that you would be doing on your own.
When you're looking at the data set,
Mm-hmm.
are you sucking in everything you can get in the hopes that you're not missing anything, or do you limit the data and then you say, oh, now we need something else and you got to bring that in?
There's some limiters. So each of the different corresponding APIs that we're talking to makes different things available to us. So we have a subset of what the corresponding platforms have for sure. They know a lot more. Google knows a lot more than we'll ever know about the customers that Google's saying should be exposed to this kind of marketing material. But yeah, so there's a subset, but it's a high performance subset. It's a sufficient subset of data that allows us to really look at the performance side of things. So performance is really what marketers care about. As long as we're getting the performance data back from them in a way that's meaningful, which they all provide, then we can make these adjustments and kind of incrementally make improvements 24/7.
Okay, now so you're getting the data like from Facebook and Google. Are you also creating your own data that you use then to help refine and modify things, or are you just relying on the pass through the data to do your analysis?
Yeah. A good question. So there's a few ways that we plug into that data. So we're certainly taking the data that is coming back to us from performance and different segments, and which segments are performing, what creatives are performing. We're also looking at any attribution partner data, which can be a little bit more granular. And then, of course, there's what they call first-party data. So we may have segments that are very specific to a customer. They may be unique mobile user IDs or other things that are addressable, identifiable, that we can then onboard to those platforms to say, hey, we want to reach these mobile device IDs across these different platforms. And so you're looking at all of that stuff. And then you start to do things like what's called incrementality, where you're saying, okay, well, I know this about my customers. Am I spending marketing money to convert customers that would actually buy, whether or not I reach them? And so then you can sort of withhold some marketing spend that was otherwise going towards people that were going to buy anyway, and then open up new opportunities. So data is a really important aspect of it's the blood of what we do.
All right. So in other words, then you're taking what you get out of the social media channels and you're adding more intelligence on top of that to give back to your customers.
Absolutely. And also taking the customer data that we're getting from the customers themselves, getting that onboarded to the various platforms, all that. Building out segments and taking care of a bunch of really grunt work, spreadsheet type of stuff, building these dynamic segments for them. Yeah.
Okay, Jim. So could you now let's switch gears a little bit again here. Could you spend a few minutes telling our listeners about your journey through your career and what defining moment led you to get into this whole realm of artificial intelligence and marketing intelligence?
Yeah, so my background, I've been in the Silicon Valley for a long time, start and funded other companies and sold those companies, that sort of thing, and was kind of looking for some interesting application, looking at what was coming out in terms of cloud computing, big data, applications for that. Marketing automation has been something that's been a part of my background in past companies. Kind of teamed up with a guy that I'd worked with a number of years ago. Sal Aurora's super bright guy. I'd been at Microsoft for 10 years and helped kind of pull together, his team kind of pulled together the machine learning and other things that help define what you see when you fire up an Xbox or a TiVo, and what sort of guide should you see when all the world's content is available on demand and there's no more linear programming and that sort of thing. And so he and I started nerding out a little bit over the vast amount of data and how social works and how we might be able to kind of apply big data, learning, machine learning, AI towards that, and found an initial sort of customer set that we could bootstrap and try some things, and very quickly saw some big gains in both time savings from an effort standpoint, improvements in reliability, so there's fewer human errors in that, and then that was the start of the journey, and it's been a few exciting years here.
Cool. So kind of building on that now, thinking about over your life, maybe some experience you had as a child or growing up, something that still influences how you approach business today.
Wow. So interesting. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years in Silicon Valley. And one of the most kind of formative things was I'm an English major. I'm a journalism major. So my training and background is really on, telling stories and understanding, how to communicate things to people and structure things and kind of start with the lead and work the inverted pyramid down. So that's always impacted kind of, my entrepreneurial set, which I never would have guessed. I never would have known that I was going to go towards the entrepreneur route, although I did know getting out of college that I didn't want to write obituaries in Des Moines for $15,000 a year. But yeah, my sort of, computer interests and background and being a lab administrator in college at the J School really took me down this path of saying, okay, well, information, the ability for people to access information is going to be radically changed. I got out of college in the early 90s and I saw the advent of the internet and I said, this is something that I want to be a part of. It's interesting to me because I have some mixed feelings about it because, you've got, it was apparent to me probably, around the time Facebook kind of opened up from kind of being only open to students to kind of open to the world. It was very clear to me that there was a lot of information on people, that we were going to be able to really personalize the messages that we send to one another. And then the downside of that is you get people into information bubbles. And so it's been an interesting thing from being a journalist and a scholar of journalism to looking at all the amounts of information that are out there, how people are interacting with one another, how people are segmenting themselves into different distinctive kind of marketing groups, and how to play in that sort of playing field has been a fascinating journey. And this is definitely right in the zone. It's really figuring out what people find interesting and they want to know about. And it's exciting to kind of bring that to customers and figure out, doing things that we could never do with print, or do things with the god-awful experiments in digital journalism that they were doing at the time when I was in college. It's just the world's changed so much, and it's been exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah, this is exciting times. I mean, it's changing rapidly and all. So, let's talk about the measurable outcomes that you've seen. So maybe you can share your screen now and show what you've achieved here.
Sure. Yeah, let me do that. Let me share my screen. So there's a few things that I wanted to kind of dig into in terms of measurable outcomes. So the first slide is really just talking about, as we do these tests or these bake-offs with customers, they care a lot about measurable improvements in what they're doing today. So cost per acquisition, or cost per view, or cost per click, or cost per engagement, all those are things that, if you can improve those, you're going to help a customer. The other thing that's really important about Athena is through this automation and sort of, taking all this stuff that's out there and all this big data and crunching numbers and applying automation to it, you can really reduce the kind of time you've got fiddling with buttons and bids and moving things around in a way that frees you up to really focus on strategy and creative. So that's one important aspect of it. So you see manual reduction in effort by 95%. You see significant improvement, sometimes much more than what we're showing on this slide. This is sort of kind of worst case scenarios there on those kind of things. And in terms of InView, I going back to that a little bit, they had the faith in us to give us a chance to work across their Facebook spend, which is a material amount of money, an important channel for them. What they saw was, applying Athena and our approach, they were able to grow their unique payers by 700%, increase their return on ad spend by almost 60%, and they lowered their cost of acquiring a paying customer by 75%. So the important thing there was they could spend a lot more and maintain those performance advantages. And so they, increase their spend on Facebook 300% alone and maintain their KPIs that they're held to from a board level. And then they then applied that across multiple channels.
Interesting. That's really great. So that's quite a testament to what you're doing here with AI and all. So
yeah.
All right. So let's go back now. If you can unshare your screen.
Sure.
The next question is, as a CEO, what are your top 3 process or business concerns right today?
Well, I mean, obviously, we're always looking at sort of cash on the books and runway and all that stuff. And we're fortunate to have built a nice growing business where we're, we've got 100% year over year sort of annual recurring revenue growth. So we're on a nice glide path now. But really, it's financing the company to grow it is always a concern for a company of our stage. So we're always, interested in having conversations with potential investors and other things. One of the other challenges that I think is kind of core to our space is, this is marketing automation. This is, you're sort of dependent on these APIs and access to data, and you've got privacy laws that are coming into effect and coming over from the EU. So all this is super dynamic, which can be kind of a little scary for some investors. But I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of what we've been able to do. And then obviously the last one is really just hiring and retaining great people. And we've been very fortunate in that regard. We keep it a relatively small team. I'm a big fan of Amazon's 2-pizza team kind of approach, where no project at Amazon can be greater than what you can feed a team with 2 pizzas. So, a smaller, leaner team with very high level operators is I think the way that we can kind of continue to eke out advantages there, as opposed to a massive team of lots and lots of low level operators. So, those are the things that kind of keep us up at night and things that we think about.
So your teams, are they co-located with you there, or do you have them distributed around the world?
For the most part, they're here in San Francisco. So, and that doesn't necessarily make it easy because there's a lot of great talent in AI and machine learning and all throughout the globe, actually. But New York is a great place, so we look to hire there. Tel Aviv, Israel. There's a ton of great places to draw from in that discipline. We certainly work with remote teams from time to time on different aspects of what we do. But for the most part, we're really, focused on the headquarters here in San Francisco.
Okay. All right. So what type of competition do you have for the services that you deliver?
Yeah, plenty of it. What we talked about initially was kind of looking at the incumbents in the space, the sort of larger players, very established, that are really in what we consider the business intelligence space, and they're trying to add on these kind of performance enhancements that we do. They're somewhat constrained in our mind by the kind of legacy business reporting and the way customers actually have historically used them to make manual campaign optimizations and changes over time. So we feel like that's an opportunity for us to really focus on this. That's why we talk about an AI first company, to start with AI and say, how are we going to solve these business challenges now that we've got plenty of cloud computing, reliable amounts of accurate customer data, all these things at our disposal. That's really where we look at it. Then there are people that focus on a particular vertical. So gaming as an example, that really focus on gaming verticals or e-commerce, those kind of things. And those are things that we think about from a competitive standpoint as well. But
now, what's the most important question your customers should be asking when they consider coming to Nectar9 for services?
Yeah, a good question. I think there has to be an openness to rapid experimentation. I myself, a lot of my customers, I can see sort of a consistency in that they're always open to accelerating the rate of learning through experimentation that is enabled by AI and machine learning. So if you don't have that intellectual curiosity, or you don't have that confidence that you have the ability to experiment rapidly and build lots of creatives and think about strategy, then it's not necessarily going to be a comfortable place for you to be. So it becomes a point where enterprises are ready to experiment with it. Give us a call. We'll set up an experiment. We'll do something that's discrete. And I would advise this of anybody with any vendor, but give it a road test. You shouldn't have to pay for that. We don't make our customers pay for those road tests. Look at the results, and then you get into a nice engaged discussion from there to say, okay, well, how can we apply this more broadly to the organization? And I think that's the way to go.
Now, here's another difficult question. But now you've been through several, as an entrepreneur, you said, for the past 20 years. So thinking about where you are today, if you had to start everything over again from scratch, what would you do different? What would you keep the same?
It's a great question. I've been through a lot of let's call them exciting cycles here, from the first .com bust, which I had a front row seat to. I was buying companies out of receivership and bankruptcy court to get a hold of their IP and figure out what to make of that. And then, of course, there was the secular downturn in 2008. So we've been through a lot of cycles. So I think really the important thing is to sort of build something that can survive a cycle. So we like where we're at, where we're helping customers grow revenue, build their business, save time. And those are the things that I think that, just sort of the post-traumatic stress of going through multiple boom and bust cycles here in the Valley kind of tend us towards the center line and sort of taking a measured approach. So, not going out too big or too early for venture, not getting ahead of our skis in terms of what we're able to deliver and from a customer standpoint, customer experience standpoint. All that's a part and parcel of where we've come from.
Okay. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time today. We're rapidly running. We're going to exceed your hour here, so I appreciate the time you've given us today. So thank you so much.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Business Performance Podcast with your business coach, Henry Schneider. For more episodes and business strategies, please visit welcome.ppqc.net/blog. That's www.welcome.ppqc.net/blog. And remember to subscribe so you can get the latest episodes. Thank you.